Ladies and gentlemen, Minecraft 1.19.3 is here with a new look for the Vex, a massive creative inventory overhaul, as well as plenty of other tweaks and fixes, and an experimental preview of features for Minecraft 1.20. My name is Slime, let me guide you through the changes in this version, starting with gameplay. You can now use a shield against the damage from explosions from TNT. And crystals. Gassed fireballs. And beds and respawn anchors. Creepers can now be ignited by clicking on them using fire charges, but not by fire charges fired from dispensers. If you use a water bucket on a waterlogged block, that now acts the same way as if you had used the water bucket on a water source. The water is emptied into the block rather than on top of it. You can now hold Q to rapidly drop out items from any container screen. And when you open a shulker box, any blocks that need support attached to its sides will now pop off. Let's look at changes to mobs. The Vex has a brand new look. The new model is smaller and looks more like the LA. Despite this, its hitbox has remained the same size as before, since Vexes were certainly hard enough to fight already without having an even smaller hitbox. Horses could sometimes suffocate when traveling through a Nether portal. That is now fixed. Speaking of the Nether, the spawning conditions have changed for skeletons, wither skeletons, and Endermen in the Nether dimension. They previously needed a light level of 11 or below to spawn, but now require a light level of 7 or below. This change is intended to make certain types of portal-based farms more challenging to construct. Speaking of mob spawning and farms, mobs can no longer spawn on top of scaffolding. When dangling on a lead, mobs would build up fall damage, which could make them die with the slightest touch on the ground. That is fixed in this version. And cats no longer break their leads when giving their owner a morning gift. Rabbits now always drop meat when killed. You can now saddle zombie horses, mules, and donkeys by interacting with them while holding a saddle. And you can also equip horse armor that way on horses, and carpets the same way on llamas. A number of notable pathfinding bugs have been fixed, including axolotls and frogs sometimes falling into deep holes when making their way around them, and frogs sometimes jumping too small blocks they couldn't land on. Other mobs also fell off when they walked around corners, and bees could get stuck in non-full blocks, all of which have been fixed in this version. Villager pathfinding is no longer broken when they end up in water. And, speaking of villagers, they could sometimes breed when not standing up. That is fixed in this version. Let's talk about creative mode, where the creative inventory has had a massive overhaul. The building blocks are now grouped by material with all of the oak items first and so on. The new colored blocks tab contains all the blocks that have variants in all 16 colors. The tabs have been remade, with the top row now being building blocks, colored blocks, natural blocks, functional blocks, redstone blocks, as well as the old saved hotbars and search tabs. The bottom row is now tools and utilities, combat, food and drinks, ingredients, and spawn eggs, as well as the survival inventory. There's one more hidden tab, however. If you have operator permissions, there's a new option in the controls option screen called Operator Items tab. Switching this on will show you another tab with operator utilities. Another change is that items can now be found in several tabs if they fit into multiple categories, so for instance you can find a composter both in the functional blocks tab and in redstone blocks. Items in the search tab are now also grouped by their position in the other tabs. This means, for instance, that searching for stone no longer gets you infested stone as the first result. There are new items in the creative inventory that were not included before. That includes the dragon egg and ominous banner in the functional blocks tab, and the monster spawner in the spawn eggs tab. All craftable suspicious stews have been added to the food and drinks tab, and they also now have a tooltip which reveals which effect the stew has. This tooltip only exists in the creative inventory. As soon as the stew is taken out, it vanishes. All 3 durations of fireworks rockets are also available now, both in the tools and utilities tab next to elytra and in the combat tab next to the crossbow. Finally, one item has been removed from the creative inventory. That is the petrified oak slab, which is now only available using commands. Looking beyond the creative inventory, there are more changes to blocks used in creative mode. Spawner blocks no longer have a default mob type when placed. Previously, you'd always get a pig spawner. If there's no mob type in the spawner, it also doesn't emit any fire particles. Pick block, the middle click functionality, now also works for spawner blocks. And when you have one in your inventory, it no longer displays as a purple colored name, and hovering over it will now also tell you which mob type it spawns, or how to change its type if there is no mob set on that spawner item. The display name of spawners is now Monster Spawner, which is what the block was already called on Bedrock Edition. There are new spawn eggs in this version too, for snow golems, iron golems, ender dragons, and withers. Out of those, ender dragon and wither spawn eggs are not available from the creative inventory due to their tendencies to wreck players' worlds. You can get them by middle-clicking on a dragon or wither, or by using commands. The polar bear spawn eggs have also been recolored to make them easier to distinguish from ghast spawn eggs. Let's talk about a few changes to world generation. Stronghold placements have shifted a bit as a result of making the code more efficient. They are still placed in the classic pattern of concentric rings, but the angle within their rings will have shifted slightly. This means that on the same seeds, strongholds might not look exactly like before or even be found in the same places. However, any strongholds already generated or located in a world will remain where they are. In the Deep Dark biome, extra copper ore amounts generated just like in dripstone caves. That extra copper ore has now been removed from the Deep Dark. This version also comes with a number of new game rules. You can toggle these while creating a world or by using the game rule command. The way blocks drop from explosions is now controllable through 3 new game rules: Blocks Explosion Drop Decay, Mob Explosion Drop Decay, and TNT Explosion Drop Decay. This controls whether loot drops from exploded blocks can decay, that is, vanish in the explosion. With the game rule set to false, all the blocks drop, that is the default for TNT. With the game rule set to true, only some blocks will drop, which is the default for block and mob explosions. There are also 2 game rules controlling fluid source generation, water source conversion and lava source conversion. When these are on, a flowing block of that fluid will convert to a source block if it is surrounded on 2 sides by other source blocks, which is the default for water, but not for lava. Another new game rule is snow accumulation height. This controls how much snow can gather on the ground when it is snowing, or specifically how many layers of snow are the maximum within the top block. If this is set to 0, no snow will form on the ground at all. All of the holiday spirit, none of the shoveling. If this is set to 8, up to a full block of snow layers can form, randomly accumulating over time. The default is 1, which only lets a single snow layer form on each block. Finally, the Global Sound Events game rule controls whether global sound events can occur. These events include the end being opened, the Ender Dragon being defeated, a wither spawning, and so on. If this game rule is off, those events are instead local and can only be heard by players nearby like any other sounds. By default, global sound events are turned on. Speaking of sounds, there are a number of sound changes in this version too. If you're interested in hearing all of those, check out the separate video I made detailing the sounds of 1.19.3. And while we're enjoying the silence here, if you've enjoyed the video this far, please take a moment to click the like button. It really does help with the magical and wonderful YouTube algorithm, so I'd appreciate it. Seriously, the algorithm is trying to eat me alive, please help. Visual changes in this version. Vibration particles are now turned the right way around. The latch on chests now rotate correctly as the chest opens. The new default skins are now available for players playing offline. If you start the game in offline mode, one of the skins will be picked at random. The scaffolding texture has been updated to a slightly different hue to better match the upcoming bamboo blocks for Minecraft 1.20. More on those in a minute. And if you're using the Programmer Art texture pack, the squids are now back to their old Programmer Art textures. In chat news, the chat preview function has been removed. Chat trust status indicators are now grey to white rather than red and yellow, and how the indicator appears has been tweaked. Chat messages that have been filtered by a server now show up with the filtered text in grey hashes, with the hover text explaining that the text has been filtered. If a moderator on a server deletes a chat message, that message will now still be visible for at least 3 seconds in total before being removed, and will then be replaced by a message saying, "This chat message has been deleted by the server," instead of vanishing entirely. The chat reporting screen now shows when the player being reported rejoined chat, and player reports in progress can now be saved as drafts when closing the reporting screen. Such drafts are kept until you leave the server you are playing on. User interface updates in 1.19.3 include a change to the potion effect display. Effects with long durations no longer show up as hidden. They now show the full time, including displaying hours if the time is that long. The knowledge book texture in the crafting UI and in the toast pop-ups is now the new one. It was previously the old texture from before the texture update. The open to land screen has been improved and now has a field for setting which port should be used. You can leave this blank to have everything work like before. The game mode and allow cheats buttons now also start out with values that match those of the world you are playing in. There's a new accessibility option called Panorama Scroll Speed, ranging from the default 100% down to 0%, where the panorama is entirely stationary. New splash texts in this version. You are valid. I'm glad you are here. You are welcome here. Your gender is valid. Contains infinite genders. And made with lava. That last one referring to a quite meme-worthy spelling error from the Snapshot series. 2 new languages have been added for this version, Nahuatl and Russian. There are changes to the telemetry system in the game. There's now a telemetry screen accessed through the game's menu. The screen shows details about what type of data the game can send, and contains a setting to switch between minimal telemetry, meaning only the required events, and all telemetry, which includes some optional events to help the development team make better informed decisions about the changes to the game. The default setting of this button is minimal. All telemetry events that are sent are now also logged to disk, and you can click the Open My Data button to view it. These files are removed after 7 days. So what data are we talking about? The required events are World Loaded and World Unloaded. World Loaded existed before this version, but one field has been removed from it, the client Java version. There are 2 optional events in this version, Performance Metrics and World Load Times. This version also contains a new system for experimental feature flags. These are toggles meant to hide unfinished or experimental features in development for future updates from regular worlds. That means some features now only show up in a world if an experimental feature flag has been turned on. You do that by enabling a built-in data pack. In this version there are 2 of those. One for the bundle, and one for all the new things for update 1.20. Keep in mind that these are experimental features, and switching them on happens on your own risk. They might be changed in the future, and any items present in your experimental worlds might break with future developments. Once you've created a world, you can't change these settings. You can't enable more flags, and you can't disable the ones you activated when the world was created. Worlds with any experimental flags on will show up marked as experimental in your world list. In other worlds, experimental items won't exist. You can't get them using a give or set block command, they aren't in the creative inventory, and so on. Experimental entities don't spawn and cannot be summoned using a command. So what are those experimental Minecraft 1.20 features in this version? Let's start with the Camel. The Camel is a new mob available when the update 1.20 experimental features are enabled. They are passive mobs with 32 health, that is 16 hearts, and they generate naturally with desert villages. Camels will follow a player holding cactus and can be fed cactus to heal and breed. They also heal very slowly over time on their own. If you saddle a camel, it can be ridden by 2 players, where the first player steers and the second player is free to do other things such as fighting. They are tall, so player height mobs will not be able to reach players on top of a camel, and they have long enough legs to step over fences. They'll randomly lay down and need to slowly get up before moving. Lazy camels. When riding a camel, they can either walk slowly or sprint. They also have a dash move activated using the jump button. This is a yeet forwards rather than a leap upwards, and using it drains the camel's stamina. A dash can extend more than 10 blocks when executed perfectly. After dashing, the camel cannot sprint or dash again until it has recovered, which takes a few seconds. Let's move on to the experimental blocks and items. First of all, bundles are now available as an experimental data pack. Just enable them when creating the world to get access. If you have a world with bundles already enabled through a custom data pack, that will keep working like before. There are also a bunch of new blocks and items in the Update 1.20 experimental feature pack. Let's start with a new wood set, the bamboo wood blocks. Bamboo blocks can now be created by crafting from 3x3 bamboo items. These blocks act like log blocks of bamboo. You can strip them to get a stripped version, and you can craft them into planks, although you only get 2 planks from this, as opposed to the 4 you get from other wood types. These can then be crafted into all the regular wood items, including doors, trapdoors, stairs, slabs, fences, fence gates, buttons, pressure plates, and signs. There's also a mosaic plank variant crafted by placing 2 bamboo slabs on top of each other. These can then be crafted into slabs and planks with the normal recipes. There are also boats and chest boats for bamboo, but they have a unique model and name. Instead of being bamboo boats, they are bamboo rafts. They work just like any other boat though. Another new experimental set of items are the hanging signs. Hanging signs are made of 6 stripped logs and 2 chains, which gives you 6 hanging signs. They're available for all types of wood. Hanging signs can be hung underneath blocks with the wide support, where you get 2 vertical chains. You can also hang them on a solid side of a block or on the side of another hanging sign, in which case you get a horizontal support rod. A third way is to hang them underneath a block without wide support, in which case the chains both go to a single support point on top. This also works hanging signs under other hanging signs. Signs in this configuration can also be placed in 16 different angles, as opposed to the other hanging sign placements that can only be placed in the 4 cardinal directions. If you want that type of placement even when a supported placement is available, you can sneak while placing the sign to always place it with the angled chains. If the hanging sign is hanging off the side of a block, it will remain floating in the air if that block is broken. But if it is hanging underneath a block, it will pop off immediately if that block is broken. Just like a regular sign, the text on a hanging sign is on the front and the backside is blank. One difference is that the space available for text is much smaller than on a regular sign. In other aspects, the hanging sign works just like a regular sign. You can dye them using dyes, and you can make them glow using glow ink. And just like regular signs, they can also be waterlogged. Another new experimental block in the 1.20 update pack is the chiseled bookshelf. This is a new block crafted from 6 of any type of plank and 3 of any type of wooden slab, where the slabs go where books would go in the regular bookshelf recipe. This gives you an empty bookshelf that can be placed and used to store books. That is, regular books, enchanted books, writable books, and written books. Each bookshelf stores up to 6 books. Aim at the slot you want to place a book in and interact with a book to place it in the shelf. Interacting while aiming at the book already in the shelf takes it back out. There's also comparator interaction with the bookshelf. A comparator will output a signal strength matching that of the book slot that was last interacted with. This means once a book has been placed on a shelf, the signal strength can never drop below 1 again. Skulk sensors can also interact with chiseled bookshelves. Placing or removing a book causes a vibration that a skulk sensor can detect. A hopper pointed into the top or any side of the bookshelf will insert books starting from the top left. A hopper underneath it will pull them out in the same order. You can also use a dropper pointed into the chiseled bookshelves to put in books. Unlike regular bookshelves, chiseled bookshelves do not increase the power of enchanting tables. The right tool to mine a chiseled bookshelf is an axe. Doing so will make any books inside spill out on the ground just as if you had mined a chest. However, using a regular axe, the bookshelf itself vanishes. You have to use Silk Touch for it to drop. One final piece of experimental functionality in the Update 1.20 pack concerns mob heads. Piglins will now drop their heads when killed by a charged creeper. When powered by redstone, its ears will wiggle and the same animation will play when a player who is wearing the head runs around. When placing any mob head on top of a note block, that note block will sound like the ambient sounds of that mob. Interacting with the block or powering it with redstone will play a random selection of that ambient sound. Note that player heads placed on note blocks do not make any sound, but that custom heads can, using some new mapmaker functionality, which I will talk about in more detail in my technical news video, which you can find linked here. But that is it for the gameplay updates in Minecraft 1.19.3 and its experimental feature packs. My name is Sly Slime, thank you for watching, I'll see you next time.